You're listening to Served Up, a podcast that features inspiring beverage professionals and topic experts that share their passions through meaningful conversations. I'm your host, Bridget Albert, also known as the Market Fresh Mixologist, an industry mentor with decades of experience. Grab a cocktail and sit back. Let's learn how we can make a positive impact in our industry. Hey, y'all, it's Bridget here. Jessica Baldo-Reggio and I had the opportunity to speak with Andrew Sinclair, the driving force behind Gonzalez Byass, a name gaining attention for its thoughtful approach to quality and craftsmanship. Andrew's work reflects a blend of curiosity, tradition, and a modern perspective, shaping a portfolio that stands out for its character and for its intention. In this interview, we'll dive into his vision, the philosophy behind Gonzalez Byass, and the inspiration that fuels his work. So sit back, relax, grab something yummy from the Gonzalez Byass portfolio, and enjoy the show. Andrew, it's so great to have you on Served Up. Welcome to the show. Jessica and I are thrilled to have
you. I've been waiting for this day for countless months, so I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for inviting me and allowing me to share some of my my comments about our wonderful world of wine and spirits.
Nice to see you, Andrew. Welcome.
Nice to see you. Thank you.
You know, Gonzalez Byass has such a rich history. For our listeners, can you give them a snapshot of your portfolio and what makes it really special today?
Yeah, so we in the US, which is where I'm based, we're essentially a subsidiary of Gonzalez Byass in Spain. So we have just a really varied portfolio. I mean, we're privileged because we get to import and represent lots of the famous brands and sherries and wines and spirits which Gonzalez Byass produce in Spain. Tío Pepe, for example, is often referred to as like the emotional heartbeat of the company. It's an iconic brand that sort of transcends categories. That's really important to us here in the US. Baronia is our flagship Spanish wine, a really exciting Rioja brand that's had a lot of traction both in the US and internationally in the last 7 or 8 years. And then we import the other wines and spirits that the Gonzalez Byass family produce in Spain. So Villanelle Cava from Barcelona. And finally, Cava's having a bit of a moment, which is great and really exciting. And then lots of spirits as well. So we produce brandy in our bodega in Jerez, where we produce our sherry. So we produce Nomad whiskey, which is a really fun product, which is a whiskey that's born in Scotland and then aged in Jerez, sort of pulling on some of our historical relationships at Gonzalez Byass. And then, of course, brandy. Brandy's been part of the DNA of the company ever since 1835, when the company was founded. And we're proud to import Lepanto, for example, which is one of the classic brandy de Jerez. And so, aside from all of the wines and spirits that we produce as a company, we're very fortunate to represent quite a varied portfolio of agency brands, and that part of the business has really expanded certainly in the last five or 6 years. So we've had some notable changes in the portfolio. We're just about about 13 months actually into a partnership with the Vineyard Santa Carolina. So we, as well as representing our own Chilean wines in Veramonte and Primus, we now also represent the wines from Santa Carolina as well. So Santa Carolina storied Chilean winery. Again, they're just celebrating their 150th anniversary, so it fits in really nicely with the heritage that we have here at Gonzalez Byass. And they have a really exciting Argentinian brand called Finca El Origen as well, which has filled a really important gap for us in our portfolio because we didn't have anything from Argentina. And so as part of that merging of the Santa Carolina portfolio, we were also able to really build out our portfolio where we had some weakness, particularly in northern Italy. So we now represent a very premium, illustrious group of wineries, such as Gianni Gagliardo from Barolo, L'Aragosse from Valpolicella, and some others. So that's been really exciting. And then because of the sort of the widening out into traditional old world regions, we've also in the last year had a couple of important additions from France. Firstly, through the Santa Carolina merge, we brought in a winery called Chateau Saint-Roch, which is a joint venture between Jean-Marc Lafarge and Eric Solomon. So that's been a lovely addition. And then just more recently, in the last five or 6 months, we were appointed the importer for Jean-Luc Colombo as well from the Rhone Valley. So it's really given us a great insight, particularly into southern France. We now have pretty much every AOC in southern France covered off, and not just covered off, but really represented by two maverick winemakers who are like just very focused on exploring dry farming and really getting to grips with the effects of climate change in southern France. You know, there are some they've had some really rough years in the last decade, so they've had to change their competency when it comes to winemaking, and that's great because all of these agency brands that have come in recently, they've given a lot more weight to the portfolio as a whole, and I think really benefited some of the legacy agency brands that we've had in the portfolio for a long time. Like, for example, ever since I moved to the US here, we've represented Domaine Wachau, which is, you know, one of the beacons of Austrian wine from the Wachau. And you know, it's really nice to be able to talk about a larger group of premium wineries when we're talking to sommeliers or, you know, customers of Southern Glazers, for example. So yeah, there's been a lot of change on the wine front, and we've got a lot of exciting stuff happening on the spirits front as well over the next couple of months. So it's all hands on deck.
That's amazing, Andrew. I feel like you just gave me a history lesson on my career. You mentioned so many brands that I've sold, and that are amazing. So that's and it's really building, you know, Gonzalez Byass. So I'm curious, what makes, like, is there a specific DNA that, you know, you guys are looking for as a company as a whole? Is there some place in the world that you have not yet explored that you want to eventually bring into the portfolio?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's really about the matching philosophy more than anything. I mean, Gonzalez Byass as a company is still overwhelmingly like operated by the Gonzalez family. It's a true family company. It's fifth generation moving into sixth generation, and you know, when you have the opportunity, for example, to like introduce Jean-Luc Colombo to our chairman Mauricio Gonzalez, you know, you immediately, there's so much synergy there in terms of philosophy, in terms of approach to vineyard management, vinification. You know, we practice dry farming in Jerez, for example, just like Jean-Luc does in Cornas. And there has to be this through line of shared philosophy, shared values, and also there's something even more fundamental in some ways, which is that you have to, with anyone that you work with, anyone that you import, you have to be able to go out for a glass of wine with them at the end of the day. If you don't have the opportunity to break bread but also to have, real human relationships where you can be honest and, share success and share failure and work together as a partnership. These kinds of commercial relationships are very difficult.
One of the things that you also mentioned was sustainability and how it's at the front and center of everything that Gonzalez Byass is trying, to accomplish. I have a two-part question for you. One, some of our listeners may not be hip to what is dry farming? That is my first question for you. Yeah. And then can you walk us through what sustainability would actually look like, right, at the vineyard and at a winery?
Yeah, so they're such great questions, Bridget, because they're both like buzzwords which you hear or you read in the press or you hear thrown around, and often all these concepts can be bundled together, and sometimes they're very separate, and they're also very separate in different parts of the world as well. So in terms of dry farming in Southern Europe, essentially the philosophy there is because of the enforced lack of water supply over a long period of time, you have to cultivate the vineyards to really work much, much harder to become adapted to, essentially drought conditions, which is what a lot of southern France has endured. We've endured that in Jerez as well. And so there's no irrigation permitted in that regard. There's opportunities with vineyards. Obviously, the philosophy is if you supply water into a vineyard, then obviously you help the process of viticulture, but you also lose a lot of the concentration of the finished product in the wine. So, for example, like Jean-Luc believes that you work with much, much smaller yields, much more difficult terrain, but much more powerful, complex and elegant wines in the end. So it's a real dedication, I think, to understanding the terroir and really, if you excuse the phrase, extracting the last drop of juice from it in that sense. Now, when it comes to sustainability, that can mean different things in different parts of the world. I think, like, for example, in Baronia in Rioja, we inaugurated during the pandemic a brand new winery that was just exclusively for our premium mark, so for like reserve level upwards, and that was an effort in sustainability which was really groundbreaking. It was the entire winery is LEED Gold certified. LEED is a certification which for American listeners will have some relevance. It's the US Green Building Council accreditation. Using lots of geothermal energy, for example, in the winery, and you can have sustainability from a winery perspective. You can also have sustainability in the vineyards, and they can mean two different things. Sustainability in the vineyard is also very, very nuanced in terms of where in the world you go. So if you go to Southern Hemisphere, if you go to South America, for example, generally, for example, organic viticulture there is generally easier than it is in the old world, just because of the local conditions. What's really become at the forefront of sustainable viticulture there, I would say, in the last decade, is more of a move towards regenerative agriculture, and that's sort of marrying together philosophies of organic viticulture, biodynamic tendencies, and really wrapping up into a different style of philosophy, and that's something that you're seeing not just in viticulture, but in farming for food generally. There was Netflix have picked up a documentary about regenerative agriculture in the last couple of years.
Are you talking about Common Ground?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
I had one of the stars of that on Served Up recently.
Oh, you did?
He's in the Vampire Diaries, and we wound up speaking for 2.5 hours about just that. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be late to a concert I was going to, but I learned so much. So yeah. I mean, it definitely is crossing over from wine to food to even in the spirits, which is such a good thing for us all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think, you have to, and it's interesting, right? Because when these buzzwords were being incorporated into, wineries' marketing jargon, it was always very difficult to convey to consumers how that provides an emotional benefit for them. But I think now wine consumers are so well educated and so savvy. They expect their wine to be sustainable and in many cases organic, not as an added value, but just as part of the intrinsic, package of what they're purchasing. And I think that's a good thing. I think it makes everyone push the boundaries of quality, further and further.
Andrew, I'm curious. Speaking of the market and the consumer, so right these days, lots of challenges: younger demo, market trends, climate change. Right, it's all real. So, how are you as a company addressing this or overcoming these challenges? Is it a marketing piece that you guys work on? Like, what's your approach to this?
There are so many different facets to it. I'll pull a few of the really important ones together. I think the first thing is that you always have to look for opportunities in a downward market. There are opportunities, and we've proved that in the last couple of years. Firstly through the performance of some of our core brands, and then also in terms of attracting new partners to the business, new agency brands to the portfolio. I think if you consume the news every single day, and this goes for the news at large, not just about wine and spirits, it's very easy to take that on board and think that you're trying to push water uphill. But it just means that you have to be more creative and better than your competition at getting to the consumer. And here we're all based in the US. We've got a unique challenge here because of the 3-tier system for a wine importer or a wine producer. And so we have to be better than everyone else, and we have to, I think, really highlight the things that make us different. And we have things that make us different. I think firstly, we're fairly unique in that we're an established wine. We're farmers ourselves. We're a wine producer, and we have our own importing subsidiary. So we understand we understand the business from grape to glass. But also, I think we've certainly tried over the last decade or so, which is really when we started to cement our partnership with Southern Glazers. We've tried to really carve a niche as an importer that's really dedicated to education internally with our distributor network. And I think that's something that the senior leadership at Southern have been very kind and highlighted. Cindy Leonard has mentioned on more than one occasion that that's one of the standout attributes of Gonzalez Byass is that we're dedicated to education. And some of that, Jessica, to be honest, comes from the fact that when you've grown up selling really difficult categories, you have to overachieve, because it takes so much more work to sell a case of sherry than it does just to take an order for a case of New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, for example. So everyone at the company, and this goes for our subsidiaries around the world as well. For example, in the UK and in Mexico, everyone's experts in sherry, in brandy, in wine, in spirits. One of the things I think you find in the US wine market is that it can attract people from lots of different industries. So people come from with different backgrounds, different sales techniques, for example. And we at Gonzalez Byass always try to instill, very much like a sort of consultative selling approach with our distributors. We want to build advocacy, and we want to do that in the right way, which is because the products themselves deserve it. So, I think to have that approach, you have to have a lot of confidence in what you're selling. And, I'm very fortunate in the sense that we have all of these amazing brands that have like true heritage that you couldn't make up. And there, I could, tell you lots of different stories about the different brands, but it when you have that opportunity to represent those kinds of brands, it makes going to market that much more fun and easier.
I'm thinking of all of the wines that you represent. I'm also thinking, Andrew, you have such a vast portfolio, right? You represent wines from the whole world. And I know you can't have a favorite child, but is there a special memory? Is there a special memory from one of the wineries that you experienced, whether like for me, I was able to meet Johnny Galliardo a couple of times, and we've done some really special events with my team and some consumers. But is there one for you that really stands out that says, wow, like, and right, it sounds like you've been in the business for a while. We all have those moments where you're like, wow, look what I do for a living. I'm so lucky to be doing this. So is there one that really stands out for you?
Yeah, I think that there really is. So I'm so fortunate. Like I've worked for Gonzalez Byass, both here in the US and also in the UK. So I've worked for the company for nearly 20 years in total. And the first time that you ever go to Jerez to go to the Feria de Jerez, which is a big annual festival celebrating sherry and tapas and the local famous horses in Jerez. There is something unique about that experience, about walking into the fairground and just seeing the amount of people consuming sherry in a truly hedonistic way that really changes. It really sort of re-cements your understanding of culture in Andalusia, culture in Jerez, what Tio Pepe means, for example, in Andalusia. And I just keep that with me. And every time I open a bottle of Tio Pepe, it sort of it takes you back to Jerez and to that incredible unique culture. And it made me realize the very first time that I went there, as well as sort of selling wine, we're selling Andalusian culture, because there is no other way to get to grips with sherry than to really understand the food, the climate, the people, the language, the history of Andalusia. And so I've often thought, as I've gone through my career, when we're really sort of an extension of the Spanish tourism board in that sense, because when you're doing complex sherry seminars, a lot of it is I always open up the seminar with what are the first things that you think of when you think of Spain, and people say, white towns, bullfighting, flamenco, tapas, and that's Andalusia. That is the quintessential image of what people think about of Spain, and that is for me, what Tio Pepe represents. So that's always been a very special moment for me.
That's really fun. Thank you for painting that wonderful picture. Can we talk a little bit about my friend, Richard Patterson?
Oh, yeah.
Not only is he the most dapper man, the most best dressed master blender that I know of. And folks, if you don't know who he is, get out your phone and Google the man right now. He is a legend. He is an icon. There is no one like Mr. Richard. He will love this. I will tell him to listen to this. Okay. And I have to tell you, you were so, oh my God, were you just so excited to get Wolf Craig? That's my question.
So excited. Yeah, we haven't touched on spirits yet, but of course, spirits is a hugely important part of what we do. And I mentioned Nomad Whiskey briefly earlier. So the relationship that Gonzalez Byass has had with Richard goes back decades. So, Richard, probably best known for his work, his legendary work.
I mean, he's literally known as the nose.
As the nose,
I have judged spirit competitions with him, the International Wine and Spirits competition, and I learned so much from him. But oh my gosh, when I saw that you picked up Wolf Craig, so exciting.
It's fantastic because it's given us an opportunity to work with Richard in a different way to how we have historically. So. Whiskey aficionados out there will know that a lot of not a lot, but a portion of Dalmore's products have historically always been finished in Gonzalez Byass sherry casks, and so for decades, Richard would come out to Jerez once or twice a year and spend hours and hours tasting individual barrels in our sherry bodega, alongside his dear friend and our maestro, Antonio Flores, who's our master blender at Gonzalez Byass. And one time, actually, when I was still working for the company in the UK, this is another very, very memorable moment about my early years in the company, Jessica, to sort of add a little addendum to your earlier question. I was very fortunate to attend a very special customer visit to Jerez, which was composed of some of the top retailers in London, people like Selfridges, Harrods, that sort of caliber of customers. And it was a joint Gonzalez Byass and Dalmore visit where we spent a full day with Richard and Antonio, first of all tasting all of the Gonzalez Byass sherries, and then tasting all of the Dalmore whiskies, which are aged in our casks. And we sat in this glorious room in the bodega and Richard had smuggled in some big cohibas as well, and it was a tasting that went on pretty much all day, and that was another wonderful experience. But so Richard's always been a great friend of Gonzalez Byass, and when we started talking about the Wolf Craig opportunity, I just thought this was such an amazing opportunity for us to sort of re-cement our commercial relationship, and we have such a strong emotional relationship with Richard and everything he does. Richard was involved in the blending for Nomad, for example, as well. So we've had some sort of reciprocity in terms of working together on projects before. But this is something that is, very, very small scale, super exclusive in terms of, volume that's available, but hugely exciting because it helps sort of create, a real lighthouse point for our spirits, and to be able to talk about Wolf Craig and Nomad side by side, and to have Richard linked through those projects is really exciting. So yeah, we're getting ready to launch in key markets here at the end of 2025, in Florida and in New York and California as well.
That's exciting, Andrew. The whole spirits world, right? Looking forward specifically, would you ever consider non-alcoholic items, or you still want to stay in the spirits and wine space?
It's funny. I think yes, we would absolutely consider it, and we've spoken. Well, we have some opportunity to move into that field. I think we need to really understand the space better before we move into it. Just the route to market for one has some unique nuances to it. Within the 3-tier system, particularly in really important markets like New York, for example. So I think to sort of answer that question in broader terms, we're very open to making sure that we're moving in the direction that the industry is moving in. We already have some really interesting lower ABV offerings within our portfolio. So you mentioned Gianni Galliardo before. One of the Galliardo's family's projects, which is very different from the Barolo's, is a project called Villa M, which is a selection of sweeter, lower alcohol wines produced in Piedmont, both still and they're doing some sparkling as well. And those wines are all they're exceptionally well made. They're 5% alcohol generally, and we're seeing a lot of momentum with those kinds of offerings. So, for example, HEB are doing a big feature on Villa M this holiday season. There's definitely there's a move towards consumers wanting to experiment with lower alcohol wines that actually taste good.
That's the key. They have to taste good. They can be really low in alcohol, but they have to taste good.
Yeah, and I'm starting to taste some 0.0 white wines which are palatable, more acceptable. I still think there's a big gulf in quality with red wines. I really do.
Yet.
Yeah, not quite there. Yeah.
For somebody that's looking to explore Gonzalez Byass wines, let's say this year, how do you suggest that they start? Any bottles that you would recommend or hidden gems to get them started?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think, it was like that question you asked before about how do you choose your favorite child. I'll make a mention of a couple of like up and coming brands in our portfolio and up and coming regions as well. Something that I would definitely urge your listeners to seek out is to really delve into the wonderful world of Albarino, which is really becoming Spain's premium white calling card. Not just in the US, but in the UK, it's had a lot of momentum previously. And we have a tiny property right down on the border with Portugal, in a subzone of Rias Baixas called Condado de Terra, which is a very small subregion about 30 miles inland. And we have a winery there called Passos de Lusco, which just produces wonderful Albarino. But with Albarino wines, you get a lot of the aromatics as a given. But these wines, which are produced just further inland, they have that additional texture, and they're much more food friendly wines. So for me, that's really interesting. As someone who almost always consumes wine with food, I find that style to be very very approachable. And that's a really interesting wine region generally for interested wine consumers to look into. A small region, but one of our newest neighbors there in Condado de Terra is going to be Vega Sicilia, who bought some land a couple of years ago. And if Vega Sicilia are moving into the area, that there's going to be some interesting momentum behind it. So I think that's one to watch. I really believe, and I sort of alluded to this earlier, that Cava is about to have its moment finally. It's been in the shadow of Prosecco for such a long time, but I think there's now a real move to understanding Cava as quality alternative to champagne that is incredibly well priced, exceptional value for money for a traditional method wine. And we have a small winery called Villanau, which is just about half an hour outside of Barcelona in the famous town of Sant Sadurní d'Anoia, which is where all the big Cava producers are. And we've been producing organic reserve level Cava there for many years. And what we're seeing is that Cava, is liquid to lips when people try it and they taste it up against some of the other sparkling wines which are out there. They're just blown away by the quality. And to be able to get these wines for under $20 retail, even with the tariffs, is great. And I think more consumers hopefully will come to understand and see the potential of Cava within their sparkling repertoire.
Cava is one of my favorites right now. I agree with you.
Great.
Well, anything bubbly, I'll always take champagne, but Prosecco and Cava work, and Cava is really trending well right now too. So great point.
Yeah.
So Andrew, what about you? Your accent, where did you come from? What moment did you decide I want to get in this wacky world of wine and spirits? Like, how did you get here?
Quite a funny story. So I was so I grew up. I was born in London, born and raised in the UK. Grew up in London, and out of university, worked for about 3 or 4 years for a beer brand. One of the at the time was the largest PPL brands in the UK market. A company called Holsten, which was a very famous German brewer. And that was a fantastic way to understand the commercial landscape of beverage alcohol. The quality of marketing, and obviously the budgets for beer brands is notable. So it's a great place to sort of ply your trade and see how things work. And I was having a great time working for them. I was there for about 4 or 5 years, and they were purchased by Carlsberg, another big global brewer, and Carlsberg offered me the opportunity to go and speak to them about carrying on, working in the industry, or they said, you can take a severance package, and I decided on the latter and used that money as an opportunity to do something which I'd really been dying to do through my teens and my 20s, which was to learn Spanish. When I was sort of coming of age, I would go to Barcelona every year to go to different music festivals with group of friends, and we would go to Sonar or Primavera, which is big electronic and different music festivals. And I was so frustrated growing up that I couldn't interact locally with people when I went there. So I thought, with this small parcel of money, I'm just gonna take it and go off to South America and see where it takes me. And so just before I went off traveling to South America, I thought, to try and give my Spanish a bit of a head start, I'll go to Seville for a week and do a intensive introductory Spanish language course, and fell in love with Seville. Went into a bar one night and was offered a glass of Manzanilla sherry and some sweaty Manchego cheese, and had never seen anything like it before, and thought, gosh, this is very different from German Pilsner beer, and it really sort of piqued my interest. And then, funnily enough, just after I got back from Seville, I got a call from Gonzalez Byass, and they were in the process of setting up their own UK importing company, and they said they were looking for a salesperson for the London market, and they said, would you be interested in speaking? And I said, well, look, it sounds amazing, and I know Tio Pepe, and I'm looking actually to move from beer into wine, and I see Tio Pepe sponsoring Gordon Ramsay's TV shows, and so it would be a great move. But unfortunately, I'm committed to going traveling. I'm actually going away next week. I'm going to South America. So I said, thanks, but no thanks. So I went away to South America. Got my Spanish up to a good standard, spent a lot of time, really understanding the nuances of South America, spent a lot of time in Colombia and Argentina and traveling around the continent, and came back just over a year later. And it just happened that Gonzalez Byass was still looking for someone for this position. And so I came back from Colombia, and I remember I went to 3 interviews with Gonzalez Byass in a week. And the night before my 3rd and final interview, something serendipitous happened. So I was staying with my parents in London, because I'd just come back from traveling. And it was the night before my 3rd and final interview with Gonzalez Byass. And I just couldn't sleep at all. I had that, the pre-interview nerves. And so I was just watching BBC. I think it was probably 11 or midnight, and there was a documentary that came on all about a British businessmen who'd moved to Spain and made a success of their lives in Spain. And it happened to be about a gentleman called Martin Skelton, who was the managing director of Gonzalez Byass UK and had worked for the company in Jerez for many years prior. And so I had the fortune of watching a documentary about Martin the night before my interview. And so consequently went into the interview and, knew all of his history and, started, repeating back to him all of his exploits. And, it was very serendipitous. It felt like it was meant to be. And, 20 years later, here I am. I ended up working, for Martin for 8 or 9 years. And now Martin actually runs our largest international operation, Casa Pedro de Mec in Mexico. So he's, so I get to see him in internal meetings in Spain, which is nice.
That's a great story. That's like everything lined up for you all along the way, right?
Yeah.
It was meant to be.
It was meant to be.
Amazing.
Totally meant to be. So Andrew, looking to the future, what is your wish for Gonzalez Byass? Where do you want to see it? What's your wish?
I really want to continue on this trajectory of expanding the portfolio where it makes sense, but we're never going to have hundreds and hundreds of brands. We're never going to be that kind of importer. We want to be known for quality in everything that we do. Later in 2025, we're launching 2 wonderful mezcal brands, which is going to be a really nice addition to our spirits portfolio. Casa Pedro de Mec in Mexico through a joint venture acquired a distillery, Los Danzantes, which is one of the iconic mezcal producers. And they in turn have 2 brands, Los Danzantes and Alipus, which we will be the US importer for. And so that's really exciting. That gets us talking about Mexico in an even deeper way. We already talk about Mexican brandy a lot with Presidente. And so, I see the future for us really being, the biggest challenge is really like coexisting all of these different, wearing all these different hats, being experts in Mexican spirits and sherry, in old world wines as well. We've got a lot of really exciting things to talk about. So it's making sure that, everyone stays focused and, that we communicate to our distributor, to Southern Glazers, what our key objectives are, and make sure that the simplicity of messaging is getting through to the market themselves, because you have to fight through a lot of noise in this market to get to the gatekeeper. And I think for us, the really important thing, I always tell anyone that I interview for a job at Gonzalez Byass, the 2 best attributes in this industry from my perspective are empathy and curiosity. If you're curious about your customer's business and you really want to, understand it and get into the weeds of it, that's going to make you a much better, wine and spirits professional. And having empathy is so much more important in this market than anywhere else I've worked, because just the huge volume of brands which distributors are representing. If you can really put yourself in their shoes and understand how they would like to receive information, I think that really helps us channel our messaging effectively. So I want to see more of that, and I want to continue on the path that we're on over the coming years.
Those are 2 great, wonderful qualities. I love both of them. Stay curious, right? Stay curious.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Andrew, thank you for your time today and for being with Bridget and myself and all your in-depth knowledge on Gonzalez Byass. We wish you lots of love and peace and happiness.
Thank you. Likewise. Thanks for having me on today, Jessica. Thanks, Bridget.
You're welcome. Cheers to you.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening. Served Up is brought to you by Southern Glazer's Wine and Spirits. Produced by Zunu.online. Music by We Killed the Lion can be found on Spotify. Make sure to subscribe to be notified of our future Served Up episodes. Cheers.